Look who appeared. Did the Filipino fix our luxury cars? The laugh echoed through the courtyard of Premium Blackstone Motors concessionaire, while 28-year-old Marcus Sullivan was walking toward the workshop with his shabby tool case. The laugh came from Brad Thompson, the concessionaire's main seller, who was next to two colleagues near a dollar-red Ferrari. Seriously, who hired this guy? It seems to get out of a butcher's movie. Marcus had arrived only 3 days ago at Blackstone Motors, one of the most prestigious dealers in Los Angeles, specializing in European luxury cars. His transfer from the small workshop in the Filipino neighborhood where he grew up should be the beginning of a new phase, but each morning it brought a new deal of humiliation disguised as joke. "Hey, Jackie Chan," he shouted another seller. "Do you at least know the difference between a Lamborghini and a Honda?" The group laughed out, while some elegant customers watched the scene with expressions of poorly disguised superiority. Marcus never imagined that his formation in advanced mechanical engineering and years of experience would be completely ignored because of his appearance. Son of Philippine immigrants, he had worked his whole life to reach there, but apparently it didn't matter to anyone in that elitist environment. Workshop manager Steve Morrison appeared carrying a clipboard, his eyes avoiding direct contact. "Marcus, you will be responsible for only used cars in the back deposit. No new cars or VIP customers. We don't want unnecessary confusion." The message was clear. Stay invisible and do not cause problems. Marcus nodded silently, his eyes revealing a disturbing serenity to someone who had just been publicly relegated. It was as if those humiliations only fed something much deeper inside him. While walking to the warehouse, he passed Brad again, who was on the phone talking loudly. "No, man. Hired a Philippine mechanic. Just imagine. Probably learned to move car-fixing motorcycles in the slum." At that very moment, Marcus stopped and turned slowly. For a second, Brad saw something in his eyes that made him swallow the next words. It was not anger or humiliation. It was something much more dangerous. Knowledge. As if Marcus knew exactly who Brad really was under that expensive suit. "Thanks for the warm reception, Brad," said Marcus with an almost imperceptible smile. "I'm sure our coexistence will be educational." There was something in that controlled tone that made Brad feel an inexplicable chill. During the next few days, Marcus observed everything. Each whispered conversation, every lie told to customers, every small scheme that rolled in that apparently respectable dealership. He noticed how Brad sold cars with hidden problems as Steve approved unnecessary repairs to inflate budgets, such as Blackstone's hierarchy worked based on those who could fool better. What none of them could imagine was that Marcus was not just another immigrant mechanic trying to survive. As everyone moved by his humble origin, he kept a secret that would transform that dealership forever. A secret that not even Steve Morrison, with all his years of experience, could suspect. The last time someone had underestimated Marcus Sullivan in this way, their company had lost millionaire contracts. But that was in another life, when he still used another name and worked in a very different world from that used cars deposit. The following Monday, when Brad arrived for another day of mockery and humiliation, he found Marcus organizing his tools with almost military accuracy. There was a subtle difference in their movements, as if something had changed over the weekend. Something that would make Brad question everything he thought he knew about the Philippine mechanic. "Good morning, Brad," said Marcus without raising his eyes from the tools. "I hope you enjoyed the weekend, because this week promises to be unforgettable." If you've been through situations of prejudice at work, then you know that sometimes the best answer doesn't come in words, but in the actions that no one sees coming. Subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple Filipino mechanic was about to turn the game in a way that all Blackstone Motors would never forget. The situation worsened dramatically the following week. Brad found out that Marcus had an engineering diploma and decided to turn it into another reason for humiliation. "Guys, do you know that our Dr. Filipino studied engineering?" He shouted through the hall, making quotes with his fingers. "Just imagine. So much study to end up fixing used cars in the warehouse." Eco laughs Aram for the entire dealership. Elegant customers turned their face with disdain, as if Marcus's presence somehow contaminated the sophisticated environment. A middle-aged lady carrying a Hermes bag whispered loudly to her husband, "What a shame, a dealership in this category accepting this type of person." Marcus kept working, but something had changed in his eyes. While dismantling the engine from a used BMW, his hands moved with almost surgical accuracy. Each movement revealed years of experience that went far beyond what anyone could imagine. Steve Morrison appeared in the warehouse carrying a clipboard. "Marcus, I need you to stay later today. We have 5 cars that arrived and need to be evaluated until tomorrow morning." It was obvious that this was another form of disguised punishment. "No problem, Mr. Morrison," said Marcus calmly. "I've been working whole nights before." There was something in that tone that made Steve frown, as if he had detected inexplicable confidence. During lunch, Marcus sat alone outside, eating a simple sandwich while watching the sellers to boast about their fraudulent sales. Brad was telling how he had sold a Mercedes with serious transmission problems to a young family, purposely omitting the defects. The guy didn't even test right, Brad. In a few months when you have a problem it has passed the warranty. It's not my problem. The other salespeople applauded his cleverness. Marcus slowly chewed his sandwich, recording each word in memory. His eyes showed no anger but something much more dangerous: strategic patience. It was as if every withered injustice were another piece of a puzzle that was silently writing. That afternoon, an even more revolting situation happened. Rosa Martinez, a Latin lady about 60, brought her old car to a repair budget. She clearly had limited resources and spoke English with loaded accent. Brad answered her with a fake smile that didn't come to the eyes. "Look, ma'am, this car is not even worth what we're going to charge to fix. Why don't you buy a better car?" He pointed to a Mercedes used with absurdly inflated price. "I can do a special business for lady." Marcus watched from afar how Brad manipulated the poor woman, pressuring her to sign abusive financing she would clearly not be able to pay. Rosa left the concessionaire visibly distressed, carrying contracts that did not fully understand. "One more," celebrated Brad with his colleagues. "These people are so easy to deceive. They barely know how to read well and want to buy luxury car." At that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Discreetly, he photographed the documents Brad had left on the table, including the fraudulent contract and handwritten notes on how to convince vulnerable customers. At night, while working alone in the warehouse, Marcus did something no one could suspect. Using his knowledge in advanced automotive systems, he connected his laptop to the dealership computers through the internal network. What he found made him smile for the first time in weeks. Brad was not just a dishonest salesman. He was involved in a much larger money laundering scheme through ghost sales. Steve Morrison knew everything and received a percentage of each scam applied. Marcus copied all digital files, including internal conversations that revealed how they specifically chose immigrant and elderly customers for their blows. There were text messages between Brad and Steve mocking the victims, calling them easy prey and ignorant people. The next day, humiliation reached an even lower level. Brad organized a competition among the mechanics to test Marcus's skills. In fact, it was a trap to publicly humiliate it in front of all employees and some important customers. "Let's see if our Filipino engineer can diagnose the problem in this Porsche," announced Brad, pointing to a sports car that clearly had multiple defects purposely introduced. "But there's one detail. If you make a mistake, you will wash all the patio cars for a week." The crowd gathered, including rich customers who seemed eager to watch what they expected to be another show of incompetence. Marcus walked to the car with the same calm as usual, as if he didn't realize that all that situation was an ambush. While downloading the files, Marcus heard Passos approaching. He quickly closed the laptop and returned to work on the BMW engine. Steve appeared at the door, suspicious. "Still working? What a dedication," Steve said sarcastically. "I hope you are not moving where you should not." Marcus raised his head, ferramentus still in the hands. "Just doing my work, Mr. Morrison, the way I learned to do." His eyes found Steve's for a moment, and the manager felt an inexplicable chill. It was as if Marcus kept something much deeper than it appeared. Each insult received only fed a silent force that grew in the shadow, waiting for the right time to emerge. What those privileged men did not know was that every act of contempt was writing their own sentence, and that the Filipino mechanic who despised so much carried secrets that make all the corrupt structure of Blackstone Motors collapse like a card of cards. The diagnosis competition that Brad had armed became his first fatal mistake. Marcus walked to Porsche with the same calm as usual, ignoring the muffled laughs and evil comments of the audience that had formed around. "Remember," announced Brad theatrically, "if our Filipino engineer cannot identify all the problems in 15 minutes, he will spend next week washing cars." The crowd laughed, anticipating another spectacle of humiliation. Marcus opened the hood and his eyes swept the engine with surgical accuracy. In less than 3 minutes, he had identified not only the 5 defects Brad had planted, but also 2 real problems that Brad himself did not know existed. Ignition coil of cylinder 3 with failure, purposely disconnected oxygen sensor, artificially obstructed air filter, ranked calmly. The smile disappeared from Brad's face. This is impossible. You must have seen someone stirring in the car before. Also," Marcus continued, ignoring the accusation, "you have a leakage in the cooling system that will cause overheating soon, as well as problems in synchronizing the engine that will cost about $3,000 to notice." He closed the hood smoothly. "Can I start with cars that really need attention now?" The audience was absolutely silent. Steve Morrison frowned, clearly disturbed by the demonstration of knowledge he had just witnessed. It was as if Marcus had just revealed that he knew much more than he showed. That night, Marcus made a call that would change everything. "Daniel, it's me," he said on the phone, walking through the dealership's empty parking lot. "I need you to investigate a company called Blackstone Motors. I want to know about fraud, money laundering schemes, all." Across the line, Daniel Rodriguez, private researcher, and former Marcus colleague from University Times, asked no questions. They had worked together in complex cases before, when Marcus still used his true surname, Sullivan Chash, heir to one of the greatest automotive technology fortunes on the West Coast. "How long do you have?" asked Daniel. "2 weeks at most," Marcus replied, observing the dealership's security cameras. And Daniel, this time is personal. During the following days, Marcus began to systematically document each crime he witnessed. Using a special built-in camera pen, he recorded Brad selling cars with serious defects to elderly customers. Steve approved fraudulent budgets and captured revealing conversations about how to maximize profits exploring vulnerable customers. The situation climbed when Marcus witnessed Brad humiliating Rosa Martinez again. "You had come back desperate, saying that you could not pay the installments of the car that Brad had forced her to buy. 'Your problem, lady,' said Brad cruelly. 'Signed contract does not go back. If you do not pay, we will get the car and will still be owed.'" Marcus watched Rose crying, carrying papers that he did not understand. That night he did something that would reveal his true identity to anyone who knew how to look. Using resources that a simple mechanic would never have, Marcus hacked Blackstone's financial systems and discovered something shocking. The dealership was not just applying individual blows. It was part of a massive money laundering scheme involving ghost sales, fraudulent financing, and tax evasion on a scale of millions of dollars. Brad and Steve were just small pieces in a much larger operation, but what Marcus discovered then made him smile for the first time in weeks. Blackstone Motors was in default with several suppliers and had huge tax debts that had been masked through creative accounting. A single well-documented complaint to the competent authorities could overthrow the entire scheme. "Daniel," I said on the next morning, "I need you to find all the clients who have been harmed in the last 2 years. We will give them something they never expected, royal justice." At the end of the week, Marcus had created a composed dossier leto with irrefutable evidence. Audio recordings, financial documents, fraudulent sales records, and a list of more than 40 victims who had been systematically deceived by Blackstone Motors. Meanwhile, Brad continued his daily humiliations, completely oblivious to the fact that every insult, every racist joke, every moment of contempt was being carefully documented and would be used against him in a way that his small mind could not even imagine. The following Monday, when Brad arrived for another day of mocking and fraudulent schemes, he found Marcus organizing his tools with almost military accuracy. There was something different in their movements, a subtle trust that made Brad feel an inexplicable chill. "Good morning, Brad," said Marcus without raising his eyes. "I hope you enjoyed the weekend, because this week promises to be unforgettable for all of us." That's when Brad realized that something had changed fundamentally, but it was too late to find out what. The Philippine mechanic he was so despised was about to teach a lesson that would echo far beyond Blackstone Motors' walls, proving that underestimating someone based on prejudice can be the most expensive error that a person makes in life. On Monday morning, Blackstone Motors seemed exactly the same as any other day. Brad arrived at a blowing, adjusting his expensive tie as he walked through the shining showroom. Steve Morrison was reviewing sales reports, pleased with the inflated numbers that did not reveal the schemes behind them. Neither of them noticed the black car with government plates discreetly parked across the street, nor the federal agents who watched carefully through telephotographic lenses. "Guys," announced Brad theatrically to salespeople, "today we have a special client coming, a widow with newly paid life insurance. You know what that means." The accomplices' laughs echoed through the hall as they had echoed hundreds of times before. Marcus kept working quietly in the warehouse, but this time something was different. He wore a simple suit under the mechanic jumpsuit, and his movements had almost military accuracy. In the last 48 hours, Daniel had surrendered evidence that would turn that common morning into the greatest public humiliation that Blackstone had ever faced. At 10 a.m. in point, 2 things happened simultaneously. First, all concessionaire computers received an automatic email with dozens of attached files, audio recordings, financial documents, fraudulent contracts, and a detailed list of all victims of the last 2 years. Second, the black car crossed the street and 3 federal agents entered the main door. "Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. We are investigating reports of financial fraud, money laundering, and extortion against vulnerable customers," announced the leader, showing her identification to Steve Morrison, whose face had been completely white. Brad tried to keep the composure, but his hands trembled visibly. "There must be some mistake. We are a respectable dealership." "Mr. Thompson," interrupted Agent Chen, opening a folder, "we have recordings of you offering cars with intentionally hidden defects, pressuring elderly customers to sign abusive contracts and mocking the victims. Would you like to hear some?" At that moment, Marcus emerged from the deposit, but it was no longer the humiliated mechanic that everyone knew. He had removed the overalls, revealing a very cut suit, and carried an executive folder that had remained hidden for weeks. "Agent Chen," said Marcus calmly, "thanks for responding so quickly to my complaint." Blood completely drained Brad's face. Your complaint?" Marcus smiled for the first time since he had stepped on that dealership. "Allow me to introduce me properly. Marcus Sullivan Chen, CEO of Chen Automotive Technologies, one of the largest automotive technology companies on the West, and son of Special Agent Chen." The bomb had exploded. Steve Morrison began stuttering something about misunderstandings. As Brad seemed about to pass out, the other salespeople watched in absolute shock, finally realizing that they had spent weeks mocking a multimillionaire who was secretly documenting each crime of them. "For 3 weeks," Marcus continued, "I systematically document your fraudulent operations. I have recordings of you selling defective cars, illegal interest rate contracts, and evidence that they washed over $2 million through ghost sales." Agent Chen opened her folder. "Rosa Martinez, 60, was forced to buy a car with problems in the transmission for $45,000, worth a maximum of $15,000. Mr. Thompson, his own pal, recorded Avra's were, 'These people barely know how to read. It's easy to deceive.' Brad tried to run, but 2 agents blocked the exit. "This is Frame. He infiltrated here to harm us." "In fact," said Marcus, calmly glacial, "I came here for a business acquisition. My company was considering buying Blackstone Motors, but after personally witnessing how you treat customers and employees, I changed plans." Marcus opened his own folder, revealing legal documents. "Instead of buying, I decided to use my influence for something better. All the victims of you will receive full compensation through a background that I created. And Rosa Martinez? She has just become the new community manager of our social inclusion division." Steve Morrison tried a last desperate card. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against ours." "Can I?" Marcus drew a smartphone and played play. Steve's voice echoed through the hall. "The more seniors and immigrants we brought, the better. They don't know their rights and rarely process." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the handcuffs being placed. Brad was arrested first, followed by Steve. As they were taken, Brad turned to Marcus with pure hatred in his eyes. "You ruined our life. We were just traders trying to make money." Marcus stared at him with the same calm he had kept during weeks of humiliation. "You have ruined dozens of lives for pure greed and prejudice. I just made sure justice was served." As the police car walked away carrying Brad and Steve, Marcus watched the remaining Blackstone employees. Some seemed embarrassed, others simply terrified of what they had just witnessed. The Philippine mechanic they had despised and humiliated for weeks had just completely destroyed the corrupt empire that thought it was untouchable. But the real turnaround was yet to come, and would prove that underestimating someone based on prejudice can cost much more than just a job or reputation. 3 months after events at Blackstone Motors, Rosa Martinez was standing in her new office at Chen Automotive Technologies, observing the city's movement through large panoramic windows. As a social inclusion manager, she now coordinated programs that helped low-income families to have access to safe cars and fair financing. "I never imagined that terrible day at the dealership would take me here," she told Marcus during a weekly meeting. "You have transformed my greatest humiliation into the greatest opportunity of my life." Marcus smiled, adjusting the documents on his executive table. Chen Automotive had grown 40% since it publicly took over the command, and was now nationally recognized not only by innovative technology, but by the revolutionary social programs it had implemented. Brad Thompson, on the other hand, was serving a 5-year sentence for fraud and money laundering. Steve Morrison had been permanently banned from the automotive industry and now worked as a salesman in a department store, earning the minimum wage that previously despised. The Blackstone Motors case had become a national landmark. Investigations revealed that the fraudulent scheme had harmed more than 200 families over 3 years, diverting approximately $8 million through abusive contracts and ghost sales. Marcus had used his personal fortune to create a compensation fund that not only reimbursed all the victims, but also provided new cars to those who needed the most. Rosa was just one of many lives transformed by what the media called the revenge of good. During an interview at CNN, Marcus explained his motivation. "I could have revealed my identity on the first day and avoided all humiliation, but I would never have discovered the true extension of corruption. nor achieved the evidence necessary to do real justice. The presenter asked if he felt that revenge had been worth it. It was not revenge, Marcus answered calmly. It was justice. Revenge would have been destroying them for personal pleasure. Justice went to use my position to protect other victims and create something better. 6 months later, Marcus received an unexpected letter in prison. It was from Brad Thompson, written with trembling lyrics. I know I do not deserve forgiveness, but I need to know that I learned. I now understand the evil I caused. When I get out of here, I want to dedicate my life to repair the damage I did. Marcus kept the letter in his drawer, along with dozens of other Thanksgiving messages that had been helped by Chen Automotive programs. Some people learn from the consequence, some from compassion, but all deserve a second chance to be better. On the first anniversary of the Blackstone case, Marcus organized a specific event. All benefited families were invited, along with representatives of other companies that had adopted similar social responsibility programs. During his speech, Marcus looked at the audience and said, "When I disguised myself as a mechanic, it was not to fool anyone. It was to find out who we were really behind the masks of privilege and prejudice. What I learned was that our true strength does not come from the position we occupy, but from the character we reveal when no one is observing." Rosa got up and began to applaud, followed throughout the audience. There were engineers, lawyers, mechanics, salespeople, and whole families, all united not by social class or origin, but by the belief that dignity and respect are universal rights. Today, Chen Automotive Technologies is studied in universities as an example of how companies can generate profit being socially responsible. Marcus continues to work directly in the workshop once a month, remaining connected to the roots that were almost destroyed by prejudice. True victory was not to destroy Brad and Steve, but prove that when we respond to injustice with intelligence and compassion, we create waves of transformation that extend far beyond our own pain. Marcus has learned that the best revenge is not to make others suffer. It is to build a world where this injustice cannot be repeated. Have you ever faced prejudice at work or in another environment? How did you react? Leave your experience in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that smart justice always overcomes ignorant cruelty.